policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Wednesday, January 16th day. I'm sorry, it says Tuesday on the paper. I'm so confused right now. I'm so grateful that you decided to join us today. I am your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined here at the Millennial Round Table by Chelsey Youman. The prodigal has returned. She is
back.
here.
Hope everyone missed me.
Oh, did we miss
everyone.
you?
I missed everyone.
Well, so great. So you've been gone for a little bit. Tell us a little bit reason why.
Been gone for a few months. I had babies. So
Babies, okay.
Boy number two.
Boy number two. So she is a boy mom to the very core right now.
Yes,
So
I
great.
am. I'm like surrounded by trucks and not a Barbie to be found.
I love it. I love it. And so you've got Crawford. Crawford has joined the clan, and so all is well back at the home.
Yes, he's sweet as can be. You all know how those babies are. They're amazing.
That's so great. Well, we're so grateful that you have made your way back, and we've got quite a show for you all today. Over the next 3 hours, we've got everyone that's coming in. We're going to be talking with Hal Habecker and David Allen, who's got a new book out called The Modern Gods of This World. And then we'll also have Stephen Baldwin in studio talking about his latest movie called The Least of These, which should be a fascinating take during the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock hour. But then during this time, though, Chelsey, it's time to just go back and forth between us. I know. I finally get to argue with you. I feel like I've been arguing with myself for so long.
Really? Is everyone just really nice when they come in?
I know. I just need people just to be
I might be less
fighters.
sassy now that I'm not pregnant, though.
No, let's hope you're sassy. But nevertheless, we've got quite a bit of show for you all today. We'll be talking a little bit about the Steve King saga. Representative King, with some of the comments that he made earlier this past week, where he kind of punted, kind of equated white supremacy and white nationalism, and kind of lessened the sting on those. And he's now been stripped of some of his committee assignments. We'll be talking a little bit about that. We'll be talking about the latest ad from Gillette, which is causing quite the hubbub right now. We'll probably get off on that, especially in the beginning. I'll be interested to hear Chelsey's comments on that. What does it mean to be a man today? There's just two arguments to be made, and just very interesting just to be able to see, especially from a Christian perspective, what does it mean to be a man? Because it appears as though there's certain instances whereby individuals are trying to emasculate men. So we'll be talking a little bit about that, as well as the top reasons young people are leaving the church. There was a fascinating study that was published in Christianity Today that gave some reasons as to why individuals are leaving the church. And since this is the Millennial Roundtable, I think we'll have a little bit of perspective on that and some anecdotal evidence from some of our friends. I know that I've got some friends that will be able to speak into that as well. But we'll also, of course, be taking some of your phone calls. So you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. Or you can jump over on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And when you see the Facebook thing, when you see the Facebooks and you go over to our page, you're going to see this live video feed. And then when that live video feed, don't be alarmed, because at times there will be an individual in a blue shirt there. It will look like the boogeyman monster, potentially Bigfoot, but just a smaller size of Bigfoot. Just go to the live, go to the comment section, put your comment or your question in there, and what you ask online, we'll try to get to over air as well.
Preferably compliment.
Yeah, preferably compliment. Yes, please. I've had quite a bit of negative pieces from the daily briefing otherwise. But nevertheless, let's jump into the first topic, shall we? So yesterday, there was great hubbub, I guess 2 days ago, actually, great hubbub over a ad that was released by Gillette. Gillette obviously has the tagline, "The best a man can get," Gillette being the razors, and they have decided, some said that they've decided to enter into the cultural milieu, the cultural fray, and trying to emasculate men with this latest ad. trying to tamp down this idea of what it means to be a man and really trying to make it in such a way that men don't have to necessarily be men in this ad. And I'm going to be honest, I'll put my cards on the table in the very beginning, and so maybe this will be something that Chelsey and I can argue about. Hopefully we can argue about, is that I don't think there's really a big deal with this ad. I think people are projecting what they've seen in the culture onto this ad, and it's caused them to be triggered in a shocking twist. But nevertheless, we're going to listen to the ad, and then we'll come back right after this.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie.
Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool. Not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men.
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
So this ad obviously has caused quite a bit of stir. We were talking about, some are saying that Gillette is embracing this Me Too movement and the new digital ad campaign that it's aimed at men, kind of been dubbed the We Believe, and really points out some of this bullying and toxic masculinity. So after you're listening to that, Chelsey, I mean, I keep on going back. There's certain instances and highlights of it that I think, well, yes, of course we want to be able to identify that because we see that as wrong. Like the idea of a man catcalling a girl on the street. Well, yeah, you gotta call that out. The idea of a dad wanting to keep their two sons from wrestling in the yard. Yeah, of course boys are going to wrestle, but eventually there needs to come a time that parents get into the fray and stop them from wrestling, because we live in a civilized society that says that aggression and force isn't the way to deal with conflict. So I understand that part. But also, I understand the context as well. So help me to be able to think about this.
Well, I guess my biggest question is the number one criticism that it emasculates men, that the ad is meant to.
So here's my qualm. I think that the majority of individuals that I've read and I've seen that have been very critical of the Gillette ad have projected the cultural narrative onto this ad and read into it. So, for example, we saw earlier this month the APA released some work and that indicated that traditional masculinity, quote unquote, is considered psychologically harmful, and they're trying to figure out a way to be able to raise men. Then there's another part. There was a recent New York Times article that says when a good daddy gets promoted to mommy, therefore kind of elevating the mother role over the father role, and saying that, and again, just trying to say, saying that the end goal, the telos, is to be able to be a mommy and really have no place for the daddy in this.
I actually took that article a little bit differently when I read it. And I thought it was a statement that men can have an equal partnership with women in the home, and that men can lead. And I think that's the biblical role established for men is to lead and take on that role and not just leave everything to women to raise the kid.
Oh, yeah.
That was a little bit my take on it, was him saying more, I want to be involved more, and I want people to not assume that I'm not involved just because I am a man.
And so then my qualm, and we've got to go to a break, does involved mean having to assume the characteristics and responsibilities of the mother, or does involved mean bringing your own characteristics and qualities there? And so we've got to go to
question.
What can I say? It's been a while. And we got to go to a break. We'll be back right after this, though.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Philip Yancey starts with an admission. I am going through a personal crisis. He explains that he used to love reading. In fact, he understands that books help define who I am. But that is his past, not his present. He has discovered that the internet and social media have trained his brain to read a paragraph or two and then start looking around. When he's reading an article online, pretty soon he's looking at the slide bar to see how long the article might be. He starts clicking on the links and sidebars. Soon he has lost interest in the original article. We shouldn't be surprised by any of this. 7 years ago, I was quoting from an article by Nicholas Carr. Since then, he has written a book that I reference every time I speak on the subject of media or digital devices. His book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, explains why we don't read as much and why it's so hard to concentrate. The internet and social media are retraining our brains. He said, once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. Philip Yancey quotes from an article in Business Insider that studied pioneers like Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Mark Zuckerberg. Most of them have a common practice known as the 5-hour rule. They set aside at least an hour a day, or 5 hours a week, for deliberate learning. The people listed in the Business Insider article probably read as many books in a week or two than most Americans read in a year. Philip Yancey acknowledges that we are engaged in a war and technology wields the heavy weapons. He is trying to develop what he calls a fortress of habit so that he can resurrect the rich nourishment that reading has long provided. I recommend that you do the same for your benefit and the benefit of your family. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And so we're back on Point of View on this Wednesday, January 16th day. So I don't know how many of our listeners are familiar with the movie Anchorman. So Chelsey, you're familiar with Anchorman and the glory that is Steve Carell, Will Ferrell, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a part in the movie Anchorman where he is Veronica Corningstone, who is the foil in the movie, decides that she wants to get back at Ron Burgundy. And in the way she gets back is she puts something on the teleprompter. She makes him read some pretty crazy language on the teleprompter. And because she realizes Ron reads anything on the teleprompter. So just so you know, I myself have channeled Ron Burgundy in this moment because on the sheet, on the rundown, it says Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Therefore, I said Tuesday. So what I'm thinking now is our producer has seen how gullible I am, how small-minded I am.
He'll read anything in front of you.
So he can take advantage of this next week. So I'm going to have to be a little bit more cautious right now because I'm just so sensitive, apparently. Apparently, I'm like a little snowflake that really just molds into whatever anyone puts in front of me. But nevertheless, that's probably more than you wanted to know. So we are so excited you decided to join us today on Point of View for the Millennial Round Table. We have been talking about this new Gillette ad. Specifically, there are many individuals that think that this ad has gone too far. It is moved in such a way to try to emasculate men, to try to strip men of those qualities and characteristics that have traditionally been kind of correlated with masculinity. And there are others that say that this is just a reaction to some of the forces that are at large right now in this Me Too movement where men have gone over and above. So if Aristotle has a golden mean of individuals, like you're wanting to settle into that mean characteristic, these individuals have gone too far. Therefore, they're trying to rectify that and pull some of those characteristics back. And Chelsey, I'm a little bit. I told you my cards are on the table right now. I don't see anything significantly wrong with this ad. I think that this is just an overreaction from individuals that shouldn't be overreacting to a large degree. I think there are other rationales and other instances that we can point to that show that our culture is redefining what a man is specifically, but I don't think this is one of those instances.
You know, it hasn't been a great year for men. I'll just put that out there.
I know. I completely agree.
You know, it's been a tough. I mean, men have been taking their licks in last year, and a lot of times rightfully so. But obviously I'm a woman, so I don't know why everyone's so offended by this ad. I don't quite get it. I think that my friend has a shirt she put on her 2-year-old boy, and I love it. And the shirt says, "Boys will be boys," and it's crossed out, and then underneath it says, "Boys will be nice." And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. To me, that this ad epitomizes that, and it just says, I think there's a place for, male aggression, and boys have to get their energy out. And I have, a 2-year-old now and a 3-month-old now. And, the 2-year-old, if we do not go outside and air it out twice a day, I mean, he just tears my house down. Like, he's nuts. And boys just have this physical energy, and that's good. And it's beautiful. And it's how they're designed, and to be adventurers and explore everything. And, like find him on the kitchen table all the time, climbing everything. Like that's all positive. Yeah. And so, if the ad were saying like boys should be women and just be, different than they're designed to be, then I would disagree with it. But it's okay to say men should channel that energy in a positive way. And, God willing, I'll raise my boys to be men who are kind and who are strong but gracious, and strong but gentle, and those are all things that I think the Bible is really our standard for what men should look like. And there were characters in the Bible and people who existed who were strong leaders, and who were obedient and who were brave and faithful men. But I would say we call sin. Oh yeah. And so in the times where David failed, we call that sin. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I'm particularly interested in, because I think, again, I just think it's an overreaction on one side that has said that this ad is too much. Because to a certain degree, yes, boys will fight. But just because there's another side of the argument that's saying that boys shouldn't fight, doesn't mean that you have to simply eradicate all types of fighting. And so what like my brother and I fought all the time. Like that was just we just were full of energy, and much to my mother, grandmother, entire family chagrin, we broke so much stuff fighting. No. Like I can't tell you how many couches my brother and I destroyed because we simply thought that we were going to climb to the top rope and then lay the pile driver on my brother, or my brother was going to atomic leg drop me. So this is what you have to look forward to. Like we just destroyed furniture. That was our deal. Like our walls, there was dents in our walls. Now, what my parents did, they knew that was a part of it, but they knew that wasn't a good part of it, because there's a better way to be able to work out of the aggression conflict. So they didn't simply just try to remove that. They tried to channel that passion and energy into feeling and understanding there's a different way to be able to handle conflict. There's a different way to be able to disagree with one another other than dropping an atomic leg bomb on the individual. And I'm dating myself talking about WWF and WCW. But nevertheless,
from a family with all girls, I have no clue what you're talking about. I'm like, oh yeah, the atomic bomb.
Yeah. And so there's a point in this ad, because obviously our listeners couldn't see it, but they can go to our website and to be able to click on the link to be able to watch it. What you do see is there is an instance where the boys are wrestling, and that's just a part of it. But also to understand that boys shouldn't wrestle it out in a civilized society in order to come to a conclusion. There needs to be a point
they
where
need to have duels with pistols.
Yeah, exactly. Alexander Hamilton. Because we have seen that when they're not shaped, when those forces aren't like channeled in a way that's conducive and prosperous, it does end up in a very detrimental place. And so I'll just read some of the numbers, because these numbers are so alarming, because you talked about this. There are 321,500 victims of rape and sexual assault each year in the U.S. That's one person every 98 seconds. Half of women have been sexually harassed in the workplace. 63% didn't report it. This is because there have been boys. They're not men. There have been boys that have not been shaped and forced and channeled in such a way that they can be conducive, productive citizens that respect one another and honor each other. Yeah,
right.
And I just don't see that there was anything wrong in this Gillette commercial that really did try to say it's time for the best a man can get to show that the measure of a man is not the best that he can get, but rather the willingness he is to lay down and what can he give, rather, in this instance. So,
yeah, I didn't see anything particularly, telling men to be women. That's not the vibe I got from the commercial. I do think I heard a really great example. I was at a pro-life meeting, and there was a man who said a study came out and showed that fathers who wrestle with their sons are more successful in life. And he said that the theory is that they teach the son how to channel the aggression in a positive, fun way, but not to hit, and they learn to establish boundaries that way. This is good. This is too far. This is fine. This is too rough. And it teaches boys to really be able to monitor themselves.
That's
and
great.
I think that's just a great example of what you and I are talking about, which is really to channel the great, wonderful ways that men have been created differently than women, that God created y'all separately with different roles that need to be allowed to flourish and grow, but they need boundaries. And, men aren't entitled to whatever they want. They aren't entitled to whatever woman they want or whatever actions they want on that end. There are limits and respect. That's where respect and I think just a general Christ-like attitude comes in.
Yeah, so it reminds me, we have a God of the boundaries, right? Even in 1 Corinthians 12, it talks about how our God doesn't like chaos. He's a God of order, right? And we even see this in the Genesis narrative. At the very beginning, we see that there is a sun and a moon, a sun to govern the day, and then a moon to govern the night. You see a water, and then you see the land. You see there's animals in the sky, and then there's animals on the ground, each to govern their own instance. But when the water proceeds to make its way into the land, that's when disaster happens. It's not good for there to be a lot of water in the land. There's you'll have irrigation problems, you have flooding problems. That's not good. It's not good when the sun stays up longer into the night. You have certain agricultural problems, or when the moon stays up longer during the day. You have certain tidal waves that happen. When it transgresses the bounds, problems abound. And so I think that this is one of those instances. There are certain qualities and characteristics that are good, that are to be harnessed, that are to be shaped. But when they transgress those bounds, that's when difficulty and that's when problems start to occur. And as relative to this Gillette commercial, I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it. I understand the culture that we're living in right now that's trying to emasculate men in certain instances and forms. I just don't think this is one of the ways. I think there's another ad. I was talking to one of our producers earlier, and there's another ad, Harry's Shave Club. Is it Harry's Shave Club? Yeah. And so they have an ad from a year ago. Now that's problematic. That's a pretty problematic ad that they put out. But we're not talking about that ad. We're talking about this ad that Gillette just came out with. But nevertheless, we would love to hear from you. What your thoughts on this are. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can make your way over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And what you share online, hopefully we'll be able to get to over the air as well. But we've got to take a break. But when we come back from the break, we're going to continue talking about how boys will be men. What does that mean with this Gillette commercial? Kind of some of the cultural implications with this as well. And biblically, how do you raise young boys to become advantageous and beneficial men in particular communities? And then we will make our way into the Steve King saga and what's going on over in D.C. But we'll be back right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate two replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, for this Millennial Round Table. We have been talking a little bit about the Gillette commercial, specifically some of the outrage that's come of it. Have they gone too far to emasculate men? Have they just kind of reacted to some of the some men that have transgressed the bounds and have disrespected women? We've been going back and forth on that. But I think since it's the Millennial Round Table, we have to bring up some of our nostalgia from the early 2000s, late 1990s. And so I had to introduce Chelsey because she's been super busy. She's been raising boys to be men in the home right now, just a few months old to 2 years, 2 years old. And so I had to tell her that the Backstreet Boys have actually have become men. They're not Backstreet Boys anymore. Yep. They're men, and they have a new song out called "No Place," and it's just it really is just it's kind of funny on one side, but it also is like something that you want to see. Like this new song that they have out, it's not "Quit Playing Games with My Heart" that you saw in the early 2000s, but now there's this song called "No Place," and there's no place that I'd rather be than right here in the home with, and just this video that's depicting them playing with their kids, loving on their wives. It's just it's a neat video, and again, it shows like, yeah, there are certain instances in our culture that is trying to emasculate men, that are trying to re-alter the definition and the actuality of a family, but then there are other instances like the Backstreet Boys are culture warriors right now of trying to fight forces of good and put normative principles in play relative to the development of the family.
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing that come out of the Backstreet Boys, but I think, I don't know if you can speak for if you feel this pressure. I don't know that there is a huge cultural change, or maybe there might just be more of an eye on the storm kind of thing. Yeah. Because I think in general, Christian men know that the things going on in the news are like, that's not something they ever would want to be a part of if they're solid Christian men. Yeah. So I don't know if I think just like the Christian male persona is really the persona that hopefully the mainstream and secular world would gravitate to and look for good examples and positive examples of. Yeah. And so I think there is, obviously there's been the reaction, right? Just because this past year, even this past year, 2018, but even at the end of 2017, the Me Too movement's been going on for years, don't get me wrong, but it really has been emphasized over the past year. And it was a wake-up call because there were a multitude of people that didn't realize that there was a lot of harm that was being done, not only in the workplace, but also was being done outside the workplace as well. And there was a point where women became, largely women, it wasn't just women, but many women became empowered to be able to speak up against the hurt that had been done to them. Now, with any large movement, obviously there were instances whereby there were women that there were certain individuals, I'll say, I don't want to just characterize as women. It was largely women that were voicing some of the hurt that had been done to them. And I thought that was a really good thing to wake us up to the realities that many women are experiencing difficulty, that are experiencing harassment, that are experiencing abuse in the workplace that needs to be rectified. Right, exactly. Because it showed that boys were not being raised to be men. Well, I think the big difference will be, I'll be curious, and I know, of course, these are totally different movements, so I don't want to create too much of a comparison here, but just on this note, in the 60s and 70s, racism was very much still like a social norm. And I think to some extent really socially accepted because that's the way it had always been. Yeah. And I would say now it is very frowned upon. I mean, we have an example with King right now being in trouble with the GOP because of his statements. In the 60s, he might not have been sat down or brought off committee, but now it's not acceptable anymore. And so my hope for this movement, the Me Too movement, is that sexual harassment is no longer acceptable and accepted, and that it is something that men think twice about, and that the society as a whole doesn't just brush it under the rug, but does, is willing to come forward and call it out. So that would be a social good out of this movement. And again, because it kind of goes back to, I don't want to fear monger, and I think one of the ways that you can fear monger in these culture wars is to be able to isolate incidents and then try to project it onto the whole. So there have been certain individuals, and their friends, I just disagree with them. There have been certain individuals that have tried to castigate, that have tried to null and void the Me Too movement, because there have been certain women, there have been other individuals that have falsely raised an alarm in order to gain notoriety or fame. I'm thinking right now of the George H.W. Bush. When they were the late George H.W. Bush, there was a woman that came out and that said that President H.W. Bush touched me inappropriately, made me feel uncomfortable, when the man was just had medical issues that really inhibited just his own movements. And so like that was a point that tried to take the air out of the Me Too movement. Now that was isolated. That's just an outlier example of the holistic movement. Everybody knows that that's a bad example. I mean, I think everybody knows every single woman has a story. Yep. If your wife, your daughter, your sister, your aunt, every single woman has a story. And so all you have to do is really talk to women in your life to really understand just how pervasive some of these issues have been. It doesn't mean obviously men are evil. It just means there's been an issue, and it's okay to call it out, call it what it is, and everyone grow up and move forward. And I hope that another outcome of the movement would be what you were speaking to earlier, which is empowering women. You know, it is the role. It's women's job to be their own defenders in a lot of ways. Men should defend women, but you know, women should be able to say no and be confident about that, and you know, really also play defense, I think.
Yeah, there were structural pieces that were in place, societal structures that were in place that really inhibited and really encouraged and propagated some of the silence that they were a part that really did silence up until this previous couple of years. And what we're seeing now is that there are many women that have found their voice won, and that voice is being heard, and that voice has had the opportunity now to be able to see justice enacted, which is a good thing, because at the end of the day, we all recognize, especially as Christians, we should all recognize the truth that we're all broken, right? Like and it's not just Christians that should know this; it's just individuals that are that can look at literature. Like you've got Dante that says that we've got dark wood inside of us. You've got Immanuel Kant that says that we have crooked timber that we are made of. Like there are other instances whereby we know the brokenness of individuals. There's the dividing line between good and evil splits through every human heart, and so we all know that we're prone to make these mistakes. But the mistake that we can further make is when we don't identify and call out evil for what it is. And when you try to sweep aside a movement, or whether you try to sweep aside an instance and keep justice from happening, that's when it becomes very detrimental, I would argue. No. Okay. Okay. So let's transition a little bit, and let's also talk about some of the other things that are happening right now. And so we can talk about Steve King, for example. Well, again, this goes back to, it's not just one, because Steve King has issued some very, very
they're as bad. The comments are as bad as it gets.
They're bad.
I mean, I think they're egregious.
Bad. They're just, and the frustrating thing is they're not isolated in nature. This has been a history that's come up. He's likened diversity to cultural suicide by demographic transformation. Rather, he once argued that we can't restore our civilization with someone else's babies, and that's quotes that he said.
It's sickening. His quotes are. I can't believe he's had as many terms in a row as he.
Yeah, and so it's been, and so what's been in response to it? They have stripped him of certain committee positions that he has, and so he no longer serves on the judiciary and agricultural committees. As of Monday, we have Kevin McCarthy that went ahead and stripped him of those, and so those were that's a good move. Now, what's difficult is when you see it on the left, right? So when you see some of these remarks that were made on The View relative to the Women's March. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. So the Women's March, one of the leaders, Gabbard, I believe is her name. I can't pronounce her name correctly. She went on The View earlier last week, and when she went on The View, she was willing to call Louis Farrakhan, who's just very anti-Semitic, who's likened Jewish people to termites, and so he has said that he has obviously said some anti-Semitic remarks, and when given the opportunity to be able to condemn him, what they did rather is they did not condemn him, but rather they called him the GOAT, which is shorthand language for being the greatest of all time, and which is just.
I'm sorry.
What? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
This gets. I'm about to get on soapbox because I'm representing right now multiple Orthodox Jewish communities and shuls, synagogues around the country. We have probably half a dozen clients. We just recently, at First Liberty Institute, filed multiple cases against Airmont, New York. So go to our website, firstliberty.org, and look at our Airmont cases, where the Orthodox Jewish community is just they undergo so much discrimination. I had one of the rabbis I was talking to yesterday. He told me we get spat on walking to our synagogue. We get physical threats. People scream at us explicitives as we walk by to go to shul. So anti-Semitism is on the rise and completely out of control. Yeah. And it's very pervasive. It's a just part of the DNA of a lot of these towns, the townships around New York City. But what's ironic to me, and I was telling my husband this last night, is I don't understand, from the party that condemns the GOP of being racist, white supremacist, how they predominantly Democrats would back. New York is a Democrat state. How are the liberals getting away with being so anti-Semitic?
Yeah. So you can go on our website, you can go to our website, because there's a link to the daily briefing that I put out, and I put a link on the daily briefing this morning to the comments, The View, where who the leader, one of the co-presidents, I should say, Tamika Mallory, went on The View and refused to condemn Louis Farrakhan's anti-Semitic.
To be fair, it should all be condemned.
Yeah. I completely agree. It should all be. But then it points to a bigger picture, and there was an expose that that was put out in Tablet Magazine earlier this month that really did show, I mean, it really did an investigative report that showed that the leaders supported a conspiracy that Jews orchestrated and profited from the slavery system in the 19th and 20th century. I mean, it really is, it's fascinating. And so you can find all of that on our website, and we will be back, though, right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Ed McDaniels was a local pastor in Upshur County, West Virginia. One day he asked the local school superintendent if he could place Bibles on a table in the local public school. He didn't want to hand students anything. He just wanted to set out the material as a resource the students could take if they wanted to. The school had a policy of allowing the local Little League, Boy and Girl Scouts, 4-H Club, and other community organizations to set their materials on a table. Students passing by could take the material or simply ignore it. In a separate policy, the school prevented the distribution of religious and political materials. Local residents sued the school system, claiming that the policy preventing distribution of religious materials also denied McDaniels access to the community information table. Eventually, the Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit determined that distributing meant physically handing out materials. In fact, the court explained that if the school kept the Bibles off of the community information table, it would breach its duty of religious neutrality and, in the words of the court, evince the hostility toward religious speech that the Establishment Clause does not require and that the free exercise and free speech clauses forbid. So look around at your school. Perhaps there's a community information table waiting to be stocked with Bibles. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
More people today are saying Americans don't really need religion, but America does need religion. Religion helps the economy, families, and even national security. Learn more by reading Saving America, 10 Reasons Religious Freedom is the Key to Our Nation's Future. You can download this free booklet at firstliberty.org/Saving America. That's firstliberty.org/Saving America. Discover 10 ways religion benefits America at firstliberty.org/Saving America.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Round Table by Chelsey Youman. We are so glad she is back. She is back. She is back. A mother of two now.
Yes.
Little Crawford.
2 under 2.
2 under 2.
If anyone has advice to email me, feel free.
So you can call in. This will be a parental advice soliciting hotline, 800-351-1212.
I'm not about asking for help.
Well, here's what I found. So growing up, my brother is 16 months younger than I am.
Oh.
And I found that we just fought a lot. And there was actually
Is that
nothing.
your advice?
There was nothing.
Nothing I can do. Okay.
Because there was where there was a will, there was a way, and I made sure. I have vivid memories of my brother and I wrestling, and we were just captivated by wrestlers during that time. And so we would just really play up the idea that the living room was our wrestling rink. And we destroyed so much stuff.
Daniel made me put up my glass tables, and I was just like, why? And now I know.
Yeah,
now
exactly,
I understand.
Exactly. We were wild. But nevertheless, we both turned out decently well. He much better than I, but shout out Ryan. So we are so. But nevertheless, let's get back onto the topic, shall we? So we were talking a little bit And I wanted to hone in on this. And so you can find it on our website, www.pointofview.net. You'll find the daily briefing link, which is the email that I send out every morning. That's kind of a newsletter that highlights 6 or 7 stories of the day and tries to give a biblical perspective on them as well. And so one of those stories that I highlighted this morning was the story that came out that the Democratic National Committee has decided they will not sponsor the Women's March, which is taking place this weekend amid some of the anti-Semitic concerns that are circulating around this area. But one of the fascinating things is this isn't just the DNC, which is, again, the DNC has been a pretty significant, when you think about the Women's March, one of the things that often has been associated with the Women's March is they haven't been pro-life. So pro-life women can't march in that from last year and previous years as well. They've been
I did not know that.
They were pretty adamant for pro-life women to not be marching in that. And so now the DNC pulling out. And again, this is from an earlier article. It seems as though there were upwards, I believe, about 500 sponsors from previous years or supporting organizations. Shouldn't just say there was financial ties, just supporting organizations. And now that number has dropped to about half of that, to about 250. And many are attributing that to some of these anti-Semitic concerns. One goes back to some of the clips that have gone, the clip that it's gone viral right now, where Meghan McCain on The View really put the heat on one of the co-presidents of the Women's March, Tamika Mallory, asking her to condemn Louis Farrakhan for some of the anti-Semitic remarks, likening Jews to termites. She refused to condemn him, but earlier called him the GOAT for some of the civil rights movement, she said. And the way that she justified it is she said that I don't call him the GOAT because of those comments, which obviously are not reflective. And this is paraphrasing her language, are not reflective of the Women's March, but rather I call him for the GOAT because of the civil rights work that he did earlier in his life, which is just when you refuse to call evil, you become, your silence fuels their evil. And so that's, again, one of the problematic things. And then Tablet Magazine, before we went to the break, I wanted to point people to this, and you can find this on the Daily Briefing. Tablet Magazine published an investigative report detailing how Mallory and other leaders from the Women's March supported a conspiracy that Jews orchestrated and profited from the American slavery system. It's just a fascinating article, because you have individuals that are associated with the leadership of Women's March, like Linda Sarsour and other individuals that have. There have been continue to be swirls of some of these anti-Semitic remarks. And so hear me, like when we call out Steve King for some of his remarks relative to white nationalism, white supremacy, that's wrong. Mm-hmm. And then when we call out some of the Women's March leadership for some of what they've said, that's equally as wrong. This should not be a partisan issue.
I completely agree.
Because, right, especially from the Christian perspective, faithful are the wounds of a friend. When you cannot wound your friend, you are no longer a friend, but rather you are one of their greatest enemies, though you are trying to enjoy their company as long as it's still enjoyable, it seems as though. But that's just the difficulty, Chelsey, and I love your comment on this. It seems as though we're living in a world in which we are so highly partisan now that we fail to hold individuals' feet to the fire simply because they're on the home team.
Right. I mean, we have to be intellectually honest. Yeah. And I think to be fair, that it's hard to just stereotype an entire party.
Yeah,
right?
Completely agree. That's
there are nuances here, and there's distinguishments to make, but I think the evangelical right is probably in a different camp than, the libertarian right, who's in a different camp than the Tea Party right. So there are factions within these parties as we're divided. But as a whole, I obviously completely agree with you that I think the GOP did the right thing by removing King from his leadership posts. Yeah. And, of course, he's elected by the people who elected him, but that doesn't mean that they have to endorse what he stands for. And I think that's the right move. I think we have to be a party that's intellectually honest about both sides. Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to the Selena Zito comment that I always go back to. It's like there's never been a day in which the parties have been so weak, but partisanship has been so strong. And so, yes, the parties have been weak. And that's why I'm always so hesitant to want to say the left has done this or the right has done this, because there's so many factions within the left and there's so many factions within the right. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is radically different radically different than a Nancy Pelosi or a Joe Biden or a E.J. Dionne. So there's just various factions within that. That's not fair to lump them all within the left. Just like it's not fair to lump together National Review with Breitbart, or it's not fair to lump together Lindsey Graham with the Jonah Goldberg, or Lindsey Graham even with Ben Sasse. There's like various factions within the right as well, and that's fine. That's fine. The party tents can be big, but I do think that, especially Christians that are trying to be intellectually honest, we do not do well when we bear false witness against our neighbor. And I think one of the ways you bear false witness against your neighbor is by completely identifying and calling out one segment when it doesn't accurately represent the segment. It's just one particular instance that does.
Yeah, I think my expectation is both parties be willing to call out the issues. And on the left right now, I think it's just, relevant to me because of some of my clients in New York. Anti-Semitism just can't be accepted. I mean, that can't be just the social norm, and to see how pervasive and like I said, a DNA level it is ingrained in these towns. I mean, one of the town slogans is "Preserve Airmont."
Wow.
And they're talking about from the Orthodox community. So it's almost bizarre to me because, in the South we have our own issues, but that's not necessarily something I've seen a lot and don't have a cultural understanding of. But my expectation is that Democrats also call that out.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. You have to be able to call out wrong for what it is. When you fail to call out wrong for what it is, you become an individual that has become an agent of wrong then, right? It goes back to the Edmund Burke quote. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph over good is for good people to stay silent. You have to be able to call it out. And then not only call it out, but I think it really does bode us well, especially in this news cyclone that we live in, that it's important for us to try to be as nuanced and try to be as detail-oriented as possible. So not all Republicans are racist, right? Not all Democrats are anti-Semitic. To be able to identify, and it really is. It's an instance whereby we're not trying to shame individuals, but we're just trying to show them that the error of their ways and really do bring it to them in that particular instance. Because how else are people going to rectify and correct their behavior if you don't necessarily identify it for them?
Right. I almost just wonder what's going to bring unity in the midst of all this chaos that we're seeing. I wish that's a comment for a different day, but I would like to see, especially with the next election amping up, just some form of unity in our country when it comes to some of these issues.
I think it's the Backstreet Boys. I think this hit,
the key.
No Place Like Home, is really going to bring us all together. One can only hope. But nevertheless, we've got to go to a commercial break. And when we come back from the commercial break, we've got quite a show for you. So you're going to want to stick around because it is going to be a hoot. And so we'll be back right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. If you look on your calendar, you recognize it as Wednesday. We usually do a Millennial Round Table, and I might just mention, for those of you that would like your millennial fix, we did cover that in a previous hour that you can watch online, but we are going to, because of two individuals that are in town, actually going to talk about a couple of other issues. Dr. David Allen is somebody we're going to be talking with in just a minute. And Stephen Baldwin, who is the actor, is with us. So Nick Pitts, it's going to be a little different. So thank you for letting me kind of slightly intrude on your Wednesday. Because you're going to intrude on my next Tuesday, if you remember, right?
I hear it's a conspiracy. I mentioned during the first hour for our listeners, the Backstreet Boys, and talking about toxic masculinity and how they've now aged and become these individuals that are talking, or that are glorifying and that are loving being at home. And I knew that it was only a matter of time when I brought up a pop culture reference that I was going to get put into the co-host seat, but nevertheless, I did not anticipate it being so quickly.
No, but we'll get you back in this chair, and you were in this chair the last hour, so we did give you the sense that that was an opportunity. And again, these are things that we only occasionally change around, but that's because we have some great guests in studio with us. And first of all, to kind of help us understand who this guest is, let me come to Hal Habecker. He's been on with us before. We've talked about his ministry, Finishing Well Ministries, and Hal, it is just great to have you back in studio. And we're going to be talking about Dr. David Allen. You and I have known him, and when I found out he could be in studio with us today, I said, let's see if we can make this happen.
Thanks, Kerby. It's awesome. Let me tell you, I met Dr. Allen in 1983 in Boston, Massachusetts, when I was serving with the Christian Medical Society.
Right.
They had their annual House of Delegates meeting in Boston that year, and David was doing a devotional on the holiness of God, preaching out of Isaiah 6. I still remember that sermon, a psychiatrist preaching on the holiness of God out of Isaiah 6. And I remember going up to him afterwards and said, David, where have you been all your life? I'd love to get to know you better. So we have had an almost 4-decade relationship, just encouraging each other and building a great friendship, Kerby.
And one of my colleagues, Dr. Charles Thaxton and Carol Thaxton, knew him from Harvard, and then knew that I'd been at Yale, and said when he was at the Yale Divinity School and Yale Medical School, have you met him? I said, no, but now I'm going to look for that name. And then, of course, we've had a chance to meet him not only here in Dallas, but you and I have also been able to be with him in the Bahamas. So let me, without any further ado, mention Dr. David Allen is a board-certified psychiatrist, an individual that graduated from St. Andrews, has taught at Harvard and at Yale and at Georgetown. Those are pretty good schools.
It is.
And if nothing else, David Allen, it is just a delight to actually get you in studio for the first time.
Thank you so much, Kerby.
We are going to talk about your book, and let me hold this up for anybody watching. It's called Shattering the Gods Within. Now, this was originally published by Moody. This is a second edition, and so we have a link there. Some people might be able to find it in the local bookstore, but if not, they certainly can order it there. As you can see, I've marked it up pretty good here as well. And it gets us into the whole issue of idols. Scott Peck really talked about that. Can you speak to that issue of why should we be concerned about this issue of idols?
Well, I got to know Dr. Scott Peck quite well. In fact, he came to Nassau when he wrote some of his books. And I remember one night being with him at my dinner table till 4 a.m. in the morning. And his impression was that the world is filled with idolatry, but somehow we don't recognize it because we look for big stones or what have you. But his point, for example, was the modern addictions are all idols. And since we're all addicted to some extent, we are really bowing to idols. And the challenge is, can we move our faith beyond our idols back to God.
Yes.
He said it's not as easy as it looks because somehow the idols are having a great play in our culture today.
You know, Nick, one of the things we're going to talk about are things like narcissism and conformity or codependency, materialism, the sacredness of affect, which is really kind of the idea that emotions are valuable. We talk about that in our Millennial Round Table, anger, illusions. These are things that we oftentimes talk about every single day here on Point of View.
Yeah, I was looking at just even chapter 3, like the first where you really get into the false gods narcissism. I'm just reminded of Christopher Leisch's work, the phenomenal work that he's talked about, especially the role that parents have played in this new generation relative to the kind of the inculcating of some of that narcissistic tendencies within children. So I've only seen an outline of the book, but know that I've got a multitude of questions about the book right now.
Well, actually, you know, the interesting thing was the book was done some years ago. Moody published it. In my work over the past few years, I've got a grant from the Templeton Foundation,
right?
St. John's Templeton, and I've been able to develop my own psychological theory, which allows me to see how this all developed in our culture. It's called the contemplative discovery pathway.
That's right.
And I simply believe it begins this way, that each human being, I believe, is born in the image of God. In other words, I am who I am in the image of God, and God is love, God is holy, and God is sovereign. And therefore, that conveys on us a powerful authority card of meaning, dignity, identity, and value. And that cannot be characterized. I am who I am in the image of God. What has happened in our culture is that because our world is hurt deeply and life is wounded, the theologians call it sin.
Yes.
Psychiatrists call it pathological narcissism. The sociologists call it alienation. But because of life is wounded, somehow the pattern we're born with gets skewed. So the love story is a continuation of God's love for us. And there are three basic instinctual needs. First of all, safety. God gives us safety. Secondly, God loves us, connection. And the third one, God empowers us. The little child born into the world has three major instinctual needs. I need to be safe. I need to be loved. I need to be empowered. And all that comes together to create trust. Every child being born into the world is looking for somebody who's looking for him or her. Sadly, that doesn't happen. So the child born is really, as Jeremiah says, before you were born, I knew you. So really we're born in the image of God, which means we have this immortal treasure. And so, what's so beautiful to me is, even though sin has marred that, Christ came to restore that. And so 2 Corinthians 4:7 says, we have this treasure in clay pots, that the power may be of God, not of us. So what happens is, when the child is born, they open to the love story, and that's beautiful. I wish it ended there. But as that child grows up, they go through their hurt trail. And as a result of that, safety now becomes abandonment. Maybe the parents get divorced. Maybe the parents die. Maybe a national disaster. Then, of course, connection goes to rejection. And then, of course, the empowerment goes to humiliation. And so when you add abandonment plus rejection plus humiliation, that is impacted hurt, and that equals shame. And shame, S, self, H, hatred, A, aimed at me. Now, what we don't realize, or what I've come to realize more, is that shame is so anathema to the human brain. The minute we feel it, we start to hide.
Right.
Beginning with Adam. When God came down, Adam, where are you? Well, I realized we were naked and we were ashamed, and we had to hide, and we couldn't come to meet with you. So what happens when shame comes? Right away, because shame implies being hidden, we have to find something to cover us. And so what the brain does, it develops a defense against the shame, which I've called the shameful self. And that shameful self, for the abandonment, creates self-absorption. For the rejection, it creates self-gratification. And for the humiliation, it creates self-inflation. It's that false self that leads to what I call the modern idolatry. The false self is a kind of compensation for the deprivation of the instinctual needs. And as a result of that, the gods form out of that. The false self is an illusion. It's a lie. Back to Psalm 4. How long would you believe the lie and turn my glory into shame?
We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Philip Yancey starts with an admission. I am going through a personal crisis. He explains that he used to love reading. In fact, he understands that books help define who I am. But that is his past, not his present. He has discovered that the internet and social media have trained his brain to read a paragraph or two and then start looking around. When he's reading an article online, pretty soon he's looking at the slide bar to see how long the article might be. He starts clicking on the links and sidebars. Soon he has lost interest in the original article. We shouldn't be surprised by any of this. 7 years ago, I was quoting from an article by Nicholas Carr. Since then, he has written a book that I reference every time I speak on the subject of media or digital devices. His book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, explains why we don't read as much and why it's so hard to concentrate. The internet and social media are retraining our brains. He said, once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. Philip Yancey quotes from an article in Business Insider that studied pioneers like Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Mark Zuckerberg. Most of them have a common practice known as the 5-hour rule. They set aside at least an hour a day, or 5 hours a week, for deliberate learning. The people listed in the Business Insider article probably read as many books in a week or two than most Americans read in a year. Philip Yancey acknowledges that we are engaged in a war and technology wields the heavy weapons. He is trying to develop what he calls a fortress of habit so that he can resurrect the rich nourishment that reading has long provided. I recommend that you do the same for your benefit and the benefit of your family. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
In studio today, Dr. David Allen, Hal Habecker, as well as, of course, Dr. Nick Pitts. And we're talking about the book Shattering the Gods Within. And also, I might just mention one of the things we're making available is there's a PDF that's sort of a diagram. And if you are a visual learner, like I suspect Dr. Allen is, I know I am. I think, Nick, you probably are fitting into that category as well. That helps kind of put some of this together. And again, you were talking about the whole idea of empowerment, safety, and connection. Now, one of the things you talk about early in the book is how we create these pseudo-gods. Right. Where do these false gods come from? Because many times when we talk about it, we're talking about the isms. You know, somebody starts this idea of a particular kind of ism and it's a false god. But you're saying that we create false gods inside ourselves. How does that happen?
What happens is that we have these basic needs, which are our dreams. We want to be safe. We want to be connected or loved. We want to be empowered. But life is wounded or original sin. And so these needs get shattered. Our safety becomes abandonment. And all the A's line up. Anxiety, anger, aloneness, what have you. And then our connection becomes rejection. And then our empowerment becomes humiliation. When you add abandonment plus rejection plus humiliation, that's a powerful shame core. That is so painful to the brain that the brain develops a defense. Just like if you cut yourself, the skin tries to heal it. The brain tries to heal itself by creating the shameful self, which involves self-absorption to counteract abandonment, self-gratification to counteract rejection, and self-inflation to counteract humiliation. But this false self is an illusion. It's not real. And the sad thing is, because we're hurt, we start to follow the false self rather than our true self. Now, we're made in the image of God, which cannot be cauterized. That stops. But the danger of the false self is, it says, you're made in the image of God, but now the false self connects our image of God to our life situation. So instead of I am who I am in the image of God, I am who I am, my fear. I am who I am, my possessions. I am who I am, my status in life, my power, my job. All of a sudden now, our image of God, which is for God who is holy and sovereign, is tied to our what? Life situation. That makes life very precarious. And the false self makes us hold on to these so-called gods, as it were, for daily life. So our possessions become me.
Incredible.
My feelings become me.
Yeah.
My status becomes me. My group of friends becomes me. So if you mess with that, you destroy me. My problems become me. And so now God is subjected to my problems. And so what is happening in our culture, our problems are one of the leading idols of the day. So if you solve the problems, you just create more. We have to learn to bow our problems to God. And bowing is a difficult thing in our culture. Because the false self says, you don't need to bow. You have self-absorption yourself. Take care of yourself. Self-gratification. Get satisfied.
It goes back to that.
And get empowered. Get into control. And you won't need God. Go ahead.
Yeah, it goes back to the Spurgeon idea of the human heart is an idol-making factory, right? And
Absolutely.
So we're naturally, there's the aversion one just because of our brokenness one, the crooked timber that's inside of all of us, right? To be able to make certain these idols. But I think it is very interesting because I would wonder what's the differentiation that has to be made between turning good gifts into bad gods, right? So when you thought about Friends, for example, Friends is one of the primary ways. It is a way that God can put his love on us and extend his love to us by giving us good friends. But how do you keep a good friend from turning into a bad god?
Beautiful. Romans 1:21. When they knew God, they did not honor him as God or worship, and did not give thanks. And therefore their spiritual thinking became dimmed or dumbed down, and they started to worship the creature and the creation rather than the creator. So what happens if you have a good friend? If that friend replaces your worship or your sense of gratitude for life, or your worship of meeting God each day, in some sense, that friend now is moving into that position which belongs to God. That becomes idolatrous. That friend has to be bowed before God. And so it's a form of repentance. The only way to deal with the idols in our life is a daily repentance. I bow my problems. I bow my friends. I bow my position. But it's hard for modern persons to bow.
Why do you think it's hard? What makes it?
Because the false says you're sufficient. You're self-absorbed. It's all about you. Self-gratification. Take some drugs. Get some money. Get a powerful job. You got it made. The control everything. Be in charge. But to control, you have to lie. And we don't call it lying anywhere. We call it reconstructing reality.
Yeah, fake news, right? Fake news.
You like that.
Do you think it's been heightened today? Is this our false selves at a new high today? Is the idea that we are the power centers, we're the control centers of our life, the captains of our soul? One might be able to say. Is it at a higher rate today than it was historically?
I want to say so because our self-absorption is so powerful. The whole idea, somebody said, David, I love you, but you got to really trust yourself today. That's all you have. Now, out of that, as you see here under self-absorption, there's narcissism, really. I love myself because, who's going to love me?
Who doesn't love me? I mean, honestly, right?
But then look at that.
And
under
the technologies reinforce that. We've talked about this on our Millennial Round Table. Yeah.
And when we see that, so under self-absorption, narcissism, the idols come, my problems become, a lady's husband died. And every time I saw her, my husband. After 2 years in therapy, I said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Your husband was a wonderful man, I knew him well, died, but you made him your idol.
Yes.
You haven't mentioned God once in the past few sessions. And I said, I'm worried because if I could solve that problem, because it's idolatrous now, another problem will come in. And so she stopped going to church. So literally, in the office, she practiced bowing instead of Greek work, bowing the husband's death to God. Went back to the church, rejoined the choir, and her life got started again. Did you follow that?
Yeah.
It's a real problem. When the problem becomes bigger than God, it becomes idolatrous. And we lose the
one of the things
power.
in your book, you talk about some of these people that just get stuck. Another one was a lawyer who had just one failure. Now, if you're a lawyer, you're probably going to have more than one failure, but one failure was enough to destroy his life. or in this case, losing a husband, which is a bigger issue than just one failure. But what you find so often in your counseling is somebody just gets stuck and they can't seem to get out of that rut or that hole or whatever metaphor you want to use.
And that shows you, because when you truly know God, right next door is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Without forgiveness, Kerby, we're stuck. I messed up. So guess I messed up. There's nowhere to go. So all I have now is my self-absorption. And so let me get my problems, make it God. My appearance. I have some people, if they gain a pound, they can't go out for the week.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lady, she just had 22 plastic surgeries.
Yes.
She said, David, is my face okay? I said, you want me to be honest or lie? I said, well, your nose is a little, oh God, no. But I said, please don't get another plastic surgery. Because it can't be perfect. So what is happening? People doing surgery after surgery. So it's now the idol of appearance. Then leadership. You got to be in charge. Get the power, no matter how you get the power. Very powerful. So narcissism is perhaps one of the leading idols today. Mm-hmm. And tied to that, materialism, possessions, repression of beauty. Somehow, that's a beautiful river there, but you can use it to make some electricity. Mm-hmm. So instead of seeing that's a beautiful wood there, let's see how we make some lumber. So we almost go for the material gain rather than the beauty. So there's a repression. Rollo May said the repression of beauty is hard to see beauty. Mm-hmm. Beautiful lady. Oh, she may make a great actress. Mm-hmm. You're so handsome. You'd be a great actor.
Thank you.
But I need to know you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But before I know you, I'm saying what you can be
mm-hmm.
is idolatrous. Then there's technology. Leave home without a phone. You want to see a problem? In the office, hide somebody's phone. They freak.
Oh, yeah.
They literally freak.
I'll fight somebody. I'll fight somebody.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, we'll go to our phone before we go to our Bible. We'll go to our phone before our devotion. Mm-hmm. At that point, the phone becomes, in my definition, an idol.
Isn't that something?
And especially, I'm thinking about it from the millennial perspective, too. Just, I think it's really interesting because, obviously, if you've been listening, one of the things that I always go back on is just this loneliness and isolation that kind of comes from it. And I think that is one of the contributing factors that would cause individuals to think that they are their own idol, the idols within, right? Because we don't have those connections with other individuals to be able to give us those hard
and that relates more
no accountability.
And then the second piece of it, though, that I think is just as important, especially for Hal here with the Finishing Well Ministries, is that we're so age segregated today that we're surrounding ourselves with individuals that are like-minded peers. And when I don't have a connection with somebody that's advanced in life that can tell me this difficulty that I'm encountering and tell me that it's possible to get to the other side, it becomes very difficult for me to be able to try to traverse through that when I don't have someone that's already been through that.
Leads to greater isolation.
Yeah. And so I just think there's some pretty contributing factors.
You're adding more idols to my list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, there is a whole section, matter of fact, quite a number of chapters on solutions. Mm-hmm. And Hal, I want to get to your comments as well, because, you've seen the success of David Allen, not only in your own life, but in others. And so we want to talk about that as we talk about this particular book, Shattering the Gods Within, as we've been talking about idols. And we have, of course, Hal Habecker, Dr. David Allen, and, of course, Dr. Nick Pitts. And we have a lot more to cover, but we'll have to do that right after these important messages.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. I suspect most of you just want to sit back and listen, and that is certainly appropriate. And if you find yourself saying, I need to hear this more than once, we have a podcast. It also will be up on YouTube in just a few hours, so you can watch it again or send it to someone else as that connects. And, of course, we have Dr. David Allen, of course, our good friend Nick Pitts, always here on those Wednesdays, and Hal Habecker. And Hal, let me come to you for just a minute before we get back to Dr. Allen. You've seen the value of this. Some people might say, well, this is very interesting, idols and all that kind of stuff, but it's really something that helps heal a person's heart and soul. And you see that actually take place, haven't you?
I have. I've seen it in me personally. You know, David's first book is called In Search of the Heart.
Oh,
it's
yes.
a very powerful book.
And
I went through it, and I called him, and I said, David, can I come and see you? So we spent 2 days together really learning how to plumb the depths of your heart and all the emotions and everything there. And he has helped me personally in amazing ways. And I've referred people to him. We've talked together. We've worked together in a zillion ways. And he has helped me personally. I've watched him help other people, and it's been amazing for me and very encouraging to see how God uses him in the lives of the body of Christ and people anywhere.
And I've seen him ask questions. And it's one of the things I always say, you know, if you look at the scriptures, Jesus asks a lot of questions, and David Allen asks a lot of questions. But there's somebody else asks a lot of questions, that Nick Pitts. So I'm going to give you a chance.
I'm so curious. And I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier about the age segregation component. Like, we're living in a world today in which, I mean, this isn't just even characteristic. You see this in grocery stores, because we have certain grocery stores now that are so segment-oriented and targeted that they're appealing towards millennials with the way they do that. We see this in shopping centers. We see this in boutiques. We're becoming increasingly segregated to the extent that it's even in churches now.
And I call that the idol of tribalism.
Tribalism. Yeah, explain that for a little bit.
The idea is that we harbor people around us who we feel comfortable with, but really God always provides community for us. You know, David had his Jonathan. Jesus had his 12 disciples. He had his female disciples, Mary Magdalene and what have you. So if you really open yourself to the Spirit of God, he will provide people. It may not be the kind of people you like all the time, but they're good for you.
Yeah.
Some are fat, some are thin, some are old, some are young. Whenever we find ourselves in a homogeneous mix, I fear idolatry, because God opens you to people.
Yeah.
So true. And so my fear is that this tribalistic idolatry happens where the old get together and segregate from the young, the millennials, and never shall be trained. Some people don't go to church anymore. They say, because, I just go into my Bible study, and that's enough. I'm not sure. The Bible says, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together, because the church is this mix of everybody. As a result of that, that's where God is.
Yeah.
But when you want to do your own little thing and create your own little group, you're creating a little tribalistic idol.
Yeah, and you're missing out. Like, I think it goes back to Ephesians 3, right? Seeing the manifold wisdom of God on full display, right? Like, when you don't have this this various forms and individuals that have no other commonality outside of Christ Jesus, crucified and resurrected, you do miss out on the perspective that's gained through individuals that have walked through valleys of shadows of death and have not only seen no evil, but can testify about no evil because God has been beside them during that time.
Right.
And so I do think I wonder, though, if the tribalistic mentality that we see today has caused the lack of trust. So I think about millennials, for example.
It does.
Yeah, we don't trust individuals anymore. 50 years ago, 50% of Americans would trust their neighbor. Now that number has jumped down to 33%, and among millennials, it's at 19%. And so I think that there's a component to that. Or has the lack of trust caused us to be age segregated? So I guess it's a chicken and an egg type of conversation.
Now notice the child born when the three instinctual needs are together: safety, connection, and empowerment. They produce what? Trust. But as they get broken, trust gets broken.
Yeah.
We don't want to call it. But when we get hurt and get older in life, trust is broken. A lot of us don't trust anymore. But as you come to know God in a deep way and realize His saving grace in your life, you start to open yourself to trust. You know why? You realize you're the least trustworthy.
And that's really the multi-generational power of the church.
Yeah.
So if we become tribal in church, we have lost the multi-generational discipleship model that the scriptures are all about.
Yeah, Titus 2, older men, younger men.
Everywhere.
Older women, younger women.
It's all in scripture.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to really focus on some of the solutions, and one of those is facing the wounded self. And that's one of the things that people are listening to this saying, well, I'm not necessarily sure I feel safe. I don't feel empowered. I don't feel connected. So is there a way back? Help us out.
Well, in my work, and that's where my psychotherapy work comes in, I get people to kind of list their hurt trail. You can draw a line from 0 to whatever age you are and make a note of the major hurts you remember. Usually 3 or 4. When you remember one, you start to remember others. So our life has a love story, love trail, but it has a hurt trail. And in my work, I take each hurt trail and I go through it. You describe the scene, you describe the perpetrators, you describe how you felt. And many times, people can recall the age. So in other words, if the hurt took place at 8, I said, well, would you like to try and be in your 8-year-old self? And then I stop. And they said, no, I can't. I remember a lady in a big country. She was a cocaine addict and prostitute. I said, can you see yourself going back to 8 years old? She was 30. She started, she said, oh, she's so beautiful. She has long plaits. He said, stop, and started crying. I said, why? I can't go back. There's a big mountain between me and her.
Wow.
I'll just stick with cocaine and prostitution. And she died. I knew her. She saw that little 8-year-old girl with all the hope. And then she stopped when she realized the gap. So what is happening as people get older, they feel sometimes that there's so much opportunity past. And some of the books and the media sort of say, it's over. I know it's in certain parts of Silicon Valley, if you reach 30-something, you're going to get plastic surgery to be like you're 25. It's idolatrous. So we're just passing out. Another professor came to my table the other day in Nassau, famous professor. He said, David, I'm invisible. I said, what do you mean? No one asks me for book comments anymore. Nobody asks my opinion. My life has been like a projector that's been playing when the lights were on. Now the film is over. The lights are out. And the theater is empty. And I felt the sadness around the table. But really what you said, his age, his accomplishments, is about to bless me and bless us. But he's saying, I'm invisible. Another older man who was a CEO said, David, all morning in the nursing home, 5 ladies just talked about blouses. And I was so lonely sitting there by myself. I said, why didn't you join the conversation? David, I've never studied blouses. So I said, sir, at 85 years old, you got to go back to college and take a course in blouses. I don't think they studied any either. So a lot of us men are caught in a time warp as well. He said, I'm a CEO. I only talk about what I know.
Right.
That's what made me successful. But sir, at 85, release it. Become open. Once an adult, what? Twice a child. But he was saying, I'm imprisoned in the way I was trained. It blessed me financially. It blessed me status-wise. But somehow it's imprisoned me as a person. When that happens, that's idolatrous. God always opens us. The Spirit of God opens us. The Word of God opens us. And that's so important. But to watch him saying, with all his accomplishments, I'm in a prison of my own self. I would have loved to be able to converse with these ladies, but I had never studied blouses.
Kind of goes back.
I don't speak. I was trained not to speak about what I haven't studied.
Well, speaking of blouses, it kind of goes back to James 4:1, the idea of what are the sources of quarrels and conflicts among you? Are they not your own desires? We are our own worst taskmasters. We are the worst slave masters that we could have. It kind of, and then it goes back to, because it goes against the very image of God that's upon us, right? It's like echoes of Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man. To be looked over instead of looked at is one of the greatest detriments that someone could be.
But it's back to the status quo. The status quo, you must be trained thoroughly and trained, and so you become like tribalistic. So in other words, at 85, if people are talking about something you haven't been trained in, you don't know anything about it. That's wrong. You can talk to people. Jaw stops war. We just got to learn to talk again. Talk and listen. Talk to children. My little grandson said the other day, Papa, you need to focus. And I said, wow, that's insightful. So I said, Johnny, say more about that. I want more food, please. Well, that was God just breaking through, speaking to who?
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
Saying, David Allen, you need to focus.
Need to focus.
And I heard it. And I said, Johnny, say more. He said, give me some more food, please. You follow how the Spirit of God works? That was for me, not for Johnny.
Yeah. Let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about forgiveness because that's one of your chapters as well. A lot of people say, okay, you don't know the level of hurt that I've been through. But again, we want to talk about this issue of forgiveness, a biblical concept, certainly. And one of the chapters in the book, Shattering the Gods Within. Second edition, Dr. David Allen is the author. He's in studio with us, Hal Habecker with us, as well as Nick Pitts. And when we come back, we'll spend just a few more minutes, just a few, talking about the solutions. And if you find yourself saying, I'd like to get a copy of that book, we have a link there on the website. And if you want to follow the chart, it's there as well. So let's take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Ed McDaniels was a local pastor in Upshur County, West Virginia. One day he asked the local school superintendent if he could place Bibles on a table in the local public school. He didn't want to hand students anything. He just wanted to set out the material as a resource the students could take if they wanted to. The school had a policy of allowing the local Little League, Boy and Girl Scouts, 4-H Club, and other community organizations to set their materials on a table. Students passing by could take the material or simply ignore it. In a separate policy, the school prevented the distribution of religious and political materials. Local residents sued the school system, claiming that the policy preventing distribution of religious materials also denied McDaniels access to the community information table. Eventually, the Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit determined that distributing meant physically handing out materials. In fact, the court explained that if the school kept the Bibles off of the community information table, it would breach its duty of religious neutrality and, in the words of the court, evince the hostility toward religious speech that the Establishment Clause does not require and that the free exercise and free speech clauses forbid. So look around at your school. Perhaps there's a community information table waiting to be stocked with Bibles. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
More people today are saying Americans don't really need religion. But America does need religion. Religion helps the economy, families, and even national security. Learn more by reading Saving America, 10 Reasons Religious Freedom is the Key to Our Nation's Future. You can download this free booklet at firstliberty.org/Saving America. That's firstliberty.org/Saving America. Discover 10 ways religion benefits America at firstliberty.org/Saving America.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, and we are talking for a few more minutes with Dr. David Allen, of course, Hal Habecker, and Dr. Nick Pitts in studio with us as well. Let me just mention that Stephen Baldwin will be with us next hour as we talk about this new movie, The Least of These. And there are a number of books. You know, Hal, you mentioned his book, In Search of the Heart, and I have that one. But there's one that I thought we might mention just a minute. Of course, there's one on shame, which I think the first time I ever heard a counselor or a psychiatrist talk about the issue of shame from a Christian point of view was Dr. David Allen.
Very powerful.
But we have one called Pudgy, and somebody said we got to talk about that. Pudgy, a Bahamian parable. Explain that if you might.
Well, I live on the beach in Nassau, and one morning I got up and I saw this little fish, and the tide had swam on the beach in the night, And before he could die, I pushed him back in the water. But then I thought, suppose I wasn't there. So I wrote the story called Pudgy, a little fish who was told by his parents not to swim too close to the beach, because in October the waves get bigger out west in Nassau. But Pudgy said, I'll swim wherever I want to swim because I'm a good swimmer. And of course, he got kicked up on the beach. Tide went down. He watched the beautiful blue aquamarine sea come, but not enough to take him back. Pudgy was beached. He flipped his tail. He flipped his body. Couldn't get back in. And along comes this lovely lady from the Bahamas Independence Society. Oh, what a nice little thing. Little fish, how are you? I'm Pudgy and I'm beach. I'm a fish. A fish without water is going to die. Now, don't be defeatist. In the Bahamas Independence Society, we believe you can help it. Just try and try. Now, I have to go to my meeting, but you keep on trying. Please, ma'am, I've been trying. Now, don't give up. I said keep on trying. You know the story? Try and try again, boys, and you'll succeed. Please, ma'am, just put... And he said... Then she goes, and he says, well, I finally get it. We need each other. I didn't realize that. Maybe Mom and Dad was right. I shouldn't have swam. And as he's about to die, a little girl was playing. She noticed, oh, my gosh, he's dying. She picked him up and put him in the water. He said, thank you, little girl. You saved my life. When the lovely lady came back from the Bahamas Independence Society, when she came back to the place where Pudgy was, she said, oh, I knew he could do it. He did it all by himself.
Yes.
Just like we said in our Independence Society. You can make it by yourself. Now he's swimming happily ever with all the other fishes. Little girl says, no, ma'am. When you left him, he was dying. I had to put him back in the water. And now he's alive. She went, oh. Your idol is where you're beached.
Mm-hmm.
And you need someone, the Word of God, a teacher, a time of prayer, a time of worship. But an idol, when you diagnose that in your life, that's where you're beached. Please work on it, because something worse can happen.
Wow.
That's why Romans is so important. Romans 1. When they knew God, they did not worship him or honor his God or give thanks. If you don't give thanks, it's another kind of idol, because everything you have, as Thomas Merton said, is a grace. If you don't believe me, hold your breath. Everything is a grace. And so when we don't give gratitude, which means GR, great attitude, when we don't have great attitude, we miss life and it's moving into idolatry. When we worship God and give thanks, the Holy Spirit comes, makes us gracious and opens life and makes hope even in the midst of hopelessness.
So I'm thinking we've got a lot of pudgy fish in the sea right now, especially in the U.S. There was some research that I was reading out of Florida State the other week that indicated that in our new modern day economy, one, we're seeing the loneliness component, but two, the reason why we're seeing this loneliness component is because of kind of some of the jobs individuals are taking, and they bifurcate. They kind of gave three distinctions for individuals here in the U.S. right now, and I couldn't help but think about these three distinctions, especially when you were referencing the idea of being stuck on the beach. The researcher said that there are individuals that are grounded, there are individuals that are mobile, and there are individuals that are stuck. They're stuck in jobs, they're underemployed, they're at jobs that are not, there's no upward mobility, they're just stuck, and there's a desire to move. It's usually identified through the unengaged at work, which is at record levels right now. I think of 68 to 70% right now of people who are unengaged at work. There's the mobile individuals that have no roots where they're living, but these are the individuals that are traveling around everywhere, and they're really isolated, and they have no home. Ben Sass has talked about these in his book Them, where he's said that these are the individuals that don't have a high school football game to go to in the fall because they don't have that community that's been built. And then there are the individuals that are grounded. Those are the healthy individuals that, work might take them other places, they might be traveling somewhere, but these are the people that are known in their local communities. It's the fact that they know their neighbors. And so when you're talking about pudgy, I couldn't help but think that, especially for those individuals that are mobile, even though they have the appearance of moving around, they're really stuck on a beach somewhere. And then thinking about the individuals that are stuck, those are definitely the lonely ones, just because they don't feel the need, they don't feel needed at work. That's why they're unengaged. And then when they're home, they don't know 50% of their neighbors, right? Because it's
it's really true. When this lady's son, who acted the part in the film, the lady from the Independence Society, when her son saw the film, he said, "Dr. Allen, my mother wasn't acting."
She wasn't acting.
She meant that.
She really believed that.
Help yourself.
Yeah.
But the powerful thing of the little film is the little girl. The child mind.
Yeah.
The Bible says, "Except you become like a little child." Getting rid of your idols means you got to let go sometime and become like a little, not childish, but like a child, and trust in God again. Jesus loves me. This I know. That little child just broke through and put him back in the water. The lady, the adult mind, was so kind of all her thoughts about independence and what have you. And the fish is what? Dying. Some of us are dying in our own family. Some of our children are dying. Some of our parents are dying. We pass them every day. We don't say a healing word. You know why? We don't see them. And that's what the story is about. But a child's heart feels it because God is very close to the child. Remember, Jesus said, suffer the little children. Have you blessed a child today? Do you realize that child, blessing that child? Jesus used to bless children. We don't bless children anymore. We just pass them. But when you stop and see a child, when you idolatrous, look at a baby's face. You'll see the angels still, the eyes. I did a funeral for a little 2-year-old child who got drowned in the Bahamas this summer. When I sat there, that little baby in the glass coffin, I looked at him. I could almost see the angelic nature. Obviously, he was not a saint, but he was innocent and went back to God, the immortal treasure that he was. But in some sense, we are the immortal treasure, made in the image of God, and that's unique. We have meaning, dignity, identity, and value. But these idols rob us of all of that, and so life becomes empty. Loneliness becomes horrible. Loneliness now is killing as many people as there's cigarette smoking.
Yeah.
It's really sad. But the truth is, the Holy Spirit is what? With us. And if God be for us, who can be against us?
Very good. We're just about out of time, but again, I think what you're passing on is that there is hope. You know, you can't be stuck, and you have to face the wounded self, but there is hope, and that's one of the things you talk about in the book, right?
That's right.
Well, it has just been great to have you in studio today, and Hal, thank you for bringing him into the Dallas area, and I hope that we can do this again, because I know he's been very instrumental not only in your life, but many of our other lives that have been a part of it, and we're doing some events with him even this week. So if nothing else, it's just been great to get him in studio, especially with Nick Pitts. Isn't this been fascinating?
Hey, so good. I love this. I'm so
glad you met him.
Yeah. I have so many questions. I just keep on thinking that.
Nick, one other thing about the shame thing.
Okay.
We don't see things as they are.
Okay.
We see things as we are. So if our heart is full of the hurt and shame and pain and idolatry, we're not seeing him in reality. So worshiping God is not a matter of just going to church. It's clearing your heart, open to God, to worship, to get rid of the idols, open to forgiveness, and let the Holy Spirit of God allow you to see.
It reminds me of the quote from David Foster Wallace: "You'll stop caring about how much other people think of you when you realize how little they think of you."
That's right. Well, let's take a break. But again, Dr. David Allen, thank you for being here, and Hal Habecker, thank you for making this possible. One more time, I'll mention the book, and we have information about it on the website in case you have any difficulty finding it. You may have seen the earlier book that Moody Press published years ago, and I'm glad it's a second edition because you have so many great news stories in it as well. Shattering the Gods Within. Dr. David Allen with us, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking with Stephen Baldwin in studio as we talk about this new film, The Least of These. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we have in studio with us Stephen Baldwin, and of course, still with me, of course, is Nick Pitts, who normally is sitting in this chair. You're getting to sit in a different chair each hour. Isn't this fun?
Yeah, I feel so good about this. I'm like the common cold, Kerby. You can't get rid of me, and I'm going to constantly nag you all the time. But nevertheless, I'm so grateful to be here, though.
We're going to be talking about this new film, The Least of These, which is a powerful and really a tragic story as well about a missionary. And I think, of nothing else, this is just one more opportunity that we take, Nick, so often to promote really good films that you can bring friends to and that you can get your Sunday school class, your church to go to, get some of the group studies and all that. It will be coming out February 1st, so I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, and it's not simply just getting together large groups to be able to come, but to come out early, because that first week in the theaters is so significant. So you want to make sure, one, that you're organizing, and especially for millennials, that can be kind of tough for us to all like commit to a particular time, but then also to follow through on that as well and to show up early for it.
Well, again, we have a link to the website, theleastofthese.movie. And again, you don't have to remember all that because it's all right there on the website. Stephen Baldwin, it's been, I now know, 10 years because I got this the other day, a reminder of the first time you and I did an interview, and that was a previous decade. So it's great to have you back in studio.
Thank you very much. I'll correct myself out of the gate here because we're here with Larry Ross, as you know, and I think I told Larry you and I have done multiple interviews.
Yes,
I know
we
we've
have
done that, but the last one was 10 years?
No, the first one. I think
the first one was 10 years.
Yeah,
okay,
first one was 10
so
years. Because I got this the other day. You know, get those Facebook posts that says, this happened 10 years ago.
Oh, right.
And both of us look a little
that
bit
popped
younger.
up for you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
so that reminded me. So anyway, and we have done some. And matter of fact, I think you've been in almost every studio. We're in the new studio here, and you and Larry Ross are getting a chance to see the new studio. It looks pretty good, doesn't it?
It looks more than pretty good, Bill. God bless you.
Yeah.
Things are moving up here.
Yeah, I think so.
No, that's good. Well, you know what? Kudos to you guys. Kudos to you, sir, because, you've been doing this a long time. And, when it's moving up, it means you're doing something good.
And
so,
we are privileged to have Nick Pitts with us. And, Nick, you bring a lot to the table here.
Yeah.
And you understand this whole idea of missions, don't you?
Yeah, I'm captivated by it, one, just because, again, just commissioned, and we've been compelled by the love of God. It says in 2 Corinthians 5:14, to be able to go into the world and to share the good news of Jesus, the one that died so that we might be able to live. And any way that you can do that is a beautiful way. And so you can do that interpersonally, one, and there's also the opportunity to be able to do that by inviting your friends to church. But also, I think one of the things I appreciate so much is now there's an opportunity to be able to do that through a really good movie too. And one, movies are just great places to go hang out. But then two, to be able to have a good story that's put before you is just a really great opportunity.
The production values are very good. And again, we will have individuals to go to the website and watch the trailer there. It's about 2 minutes long. The music is out of the charts because, I go every year to Budapest, Hungary, and the orchestra there does it. And, of course, you have music by Michael W. Smith, Nicole Mullins, and Toby Mac, to mention just a few. So even before we get to all the acting, Stephen Baldwin, you've got quite a film that you're a part of right now. Tell us more.
Well, again, excuse me, the title is The Least of These. There has been a previous title from about 10 years ago, so if you start Googling and all that, best thing to do is just go to leastofthese.movie, not .com.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say that to somebody when they're on their iPhone. You go .movie, and they put in and they go, "Is this it?" And you go, "No." So forgive me for that. I know you understand the importance of this because we want to drive people right to the place where they can do what you were talking about, to share it with their friends, share it with their community, share it with their church. That's the vision of this thing. It's called The Least of These. It's a wonderful, extremely powerful biopic film based on the real events and the tragic loss of Graham Staines and his two children in 1999. He was an Australian doctor, really by trade, who had a medical clinic working with lepers in India.
Right.
And he was a Christian. And he would use that platform as an opportunity to connect with the Indian community legally. That's an important story point. And The Least of These is the story, and I played Graham Staines in the movie, so forgive me, I paused just for a personal moment there. It's really the story of one man's awesome humility, really.
Yes.
And then right after that, imagine the same power in a wife of the same humility.
Who later won all sorts of awards.
Sure.
Gladys
Gladys Staines,
just
the widow,
the Mother Teresa Memorial Award, and others. Go ahead.
Gladys Staines. No, I'm just saying, so many Christians know the story of Graham Staines. So many people can Google Graham Staines and learn like what happened.
Which is sad.
This film is a story shaped around those true biopic events. So that, for me, that's cut to this fantastic actor named Sharman Joshi from India. And kudos to our writer, Andrew, who wrote a brilliant story where he took the storyline of a journalist investigating Graham Staines, and then it tells the story of what really happened. And then the power of what the Holy Spirit did after that. So really it's just it's intended to be something worthy of honoring what God did in all of this, and honorable of the legacy of Graham Staines, which I really believe it is. So between all of that, and Sherry Rigby is in the movie, and she's fantastic as well. So it's really neat, and the cinematography is wonderful, and the music's brilliant. So this is what's cool about this for us Christians, so to speak. No matter what your denomination, what's interesting about this is one of those movies we can all connect on. This is just a true story of a tragedy that happened to a super humble Christian, and honoring that and letting the Lord use it to be to glorify Jesus. So that's what it is. But on top of that, the cherry on top is it's a beautiful film. So even for people who aren't Christians, the idea of a mother losing her two baby boys is a connection to all of our hearts.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. That's terrible. So there's that connectivity in that result, in that regard as well.
Nick, I was just thinking too that sometimes when we say Christian film, people go, "Well, do I want to bring my friend to this?" But this is a really different kind of a much higher order of magnitude in terms of what is going to be on the screen.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of components to it. One, I think there's the component that it's a story that's real. Like, it's still close enough to where many of us can remember it when it was in the headlines. And then I think the second piece that I think is so pertinent and what I know will be powerfully depicted in the movie, it just reminds me of what N.T. Wright says. N.T. Wright says that you can tell someone to do something and you'll change their day. You can share a story and you'll change their life. And this is a powerful story, one. And then just to hear the characters and the individuals that were involved in that too has the propensity to create some ripples in the culture that I think can only be beneficial moving forward.
Let's take a break, because this is one of those ones where I hope as you're hearing this, you might say this would be a great way to promote missions inside my church, a good way to bring your church, your Sunday school class, your small group, or whatever. So we're going to take a break, and we do have a link so that you don't have to remember all of those particular links. And as you go to that website, just go and click on the picture there that we have, of course, of Stephen Baldwin and The Least of These. Then you can find out a little bit more about watching the trailer, getting group tickets, and again, theleastofthese.movie. And we'll come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Philip Yancey starts with an admission. I am going through a personal crisis. He explains that he used to love reading. In fact, he understands that books help define who I am. But that is his past, not his present. He has discovered that the internet and social media have trained his brain to read a paragraph or two and then start looking around. When he's reading an article online, pretty soon he's looking at the slide bar to see how long the article might be. He starts clicking on the links and sidebars. Soon he has lost interest in the original article. We shouldn't be surprised by any of this. 7 years ago, I was quoting from an article by Nicholas Carr. Since then, he has written a book that I reference every time I speak on the subject of media or digital devices. His book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, explains why we don't read as much and why it's so hard to concentrate. The internet and social media are retraining our brains. He said, once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. Philip Yancey quotes from an article in Business Insider that studied pioneers like Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Mark Zuckerberg. Most of them have a common practice known as the 5-hour rule. They set aside at least an hour a day, or 5 hours a week, for deliberate learning. The people listed in the Business Insider article probably read as many books in a week or two than most Americans read in a year. Philip Yancey acknowledges that we are engaged in a war and technology wields the heavy weapons. He is trying to develop what he calls a fortress of habit so that he can resurrect the rich nourishment that reading has long provided. I recommend that you do the same for your benefit and the benefit of your family. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, Stephen Baldwin in studio with us, and Dr. Nick Pitts as well, talking about the book and the movie and all sorts of resources. The movie, The Least of These, the Graham Staines story. Of course, you can read a lot more about that as well. We have a link to theleastofthese.movie. There is a trailer there that I would really encourage all of you to watch, and then click that share button. Put it on your Facebook page or send it to someone. Maybe you have somebody involved in missions in your church. Maybe your pastor needs to know about that. Take the time to pass it on to them, and there's also a place where you can get group tickets. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. But, Nicholas, if we can, maybe get into the story itself. It is powerful.
Yeah, Stephen, so obviously it's a powerful story. You're an individual that had to just really embody Graham during this in this role. Is there something in particular about the story or about his life that just sticks out to you even after filming is done, now that you're making your way towards publicizing this? Is there something in the making of the movie, some aspect, some story component, some event that really stood out to you that still just impressed you today?
Gosh, you have these moments when you work on movies.
Yeah.
Movies are, if you can imagine the process of this kind of content creation, which most of the listeners don't understand. They don't understand that 400 people after the movie was finished, between the production crew and post-production, 400 hands touched this process. And then all of a sudden you sit in a seat and watch it. So much impacts all of that. So I think for me, the thing that resonated the most, and I'm not just saying it, because when people think of India, they think of the prettiness of the colors and the food and the interesting history and the this and the that. But the people are a beautiful people. You know what I mean? The people of India are so tender-hearted. The Hindu, believing folks, and so I think that was probably the interesting memory that I have most was kind of between the Indians on set that were already believers, but just the experience of being there, telling this story, and working with locals. And them remembering that the ministry part of it was like almost already happening. It's just interesting. There's a mystery. There's a really kind of a cloud of the Holy Spirit on this one, because like we're not even doing anything already, and it's like people. It points to Jesus. So I think really the heart of the Indian people is the thing that stuck with me the most while filming, and. It was unique. Again, it was a unique filming situation. It was 70 miles outside of Hyderabad, which is Hyderabad. And Hyderabad is, to give you a moment in the filming, not necessarily.
No.
Here's the story actually that you just popped up, which is great. So not really necessarily relevant to the filming, but I remember being in Hyderabad, and it's 50% Muslim. It's Hindi and Muslim. So now here you are in India, and you're seeing Indian women from India in burqas walking around the streets of Hyderabad. So as a believer, and this is just me talking, if you understand these other religions, if you understand their protocols and postures and behaviors and traditions, it was staggering for me to be there and think, these women I'm seeing now, in God's timing, may see this film. Wow. And that's something. Isn't that powerful? Because you don't, again, you think, and why do I bring up that story? Because if a Christian were to engage somebody in a conversation that were this faith, that faith, this, if you talk to a Hindu, they're pretty wide open to listen at least.
Right.
Talk to a Muslim, they're not going at all to be. So for me, the positioning of all this, for me, it was no coincidence we passed through Hyderabad on our way to filming the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, it's just that thing. It's kind of the sweet awesomeness of knowing in the retrospect, God's doing this.
That's rich. One of the things I love about the film is that you could have just had a story about the missionary, but instead it's sort of a story about the journalist doing the investigation, and then
Correct.
You aren't necessarily the primary focus. And so I'm just thinking in my own neighborhood, we have a very high percentage of Indian individuals, people from India. I think I could invite every one of them there because they would see this as a story about India, but at the same time, they get a chance to hear a little bit more about Graham Staines and the gospel. So I think it's written in such a way and developed in such a way that I think we can bring our non-Christian friends and people even from different faiths and religions, right, to the movie?
No question. And here's the cool part. Movies are movies, and movies are compelling and captivating and engaging and all that good stuff. But movies mostly should be a good story well told. And this film is a great story, very well told. So for me, it's powerful. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm blessed to be a part of it, guys. It's Sharman Joshi's amazing. Sherry Rigby's amazing. Think for me, when you're doing Jesus stuff and it crosses over into the culture in certain ways where some people are coming back to us already and saying, hey, they're saying this thing's so awesome. Like, maybe some folks in Hollywood might actually consider it for some awards. And I'm sitting there going, what?
That's so good. That is so good.
But here's what's really cool is that's not me saying it. I'm in the dang thing. I'm just keeping my mouth shut, as best I can. But it's wonderful to see already in the virality of what's happening that folks are saying that this film is so special. There's people whispering about that. So listen, yes and amen. I hope Sherman and Sherry win a zillion awards. It'd be wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that he brings up a really great point, and this is where I would talk to my millennial friends about this, that we all know that the research proves it, as well as our own anecdotal observations have shown that it's more powerful, one, if individuals are willing to share this on their own social media, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram stories, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Snapchat. There's much more power in your sharing this on your social media page than there could be in advertising dollars that are put out there. And so it's increasingly important. It's just a simple click of a button to click share, like, I'm going to do this. And so not simply just to talk about it, but to be about it as well. And who wouldn't like to go see a movie, right? Get a little popcorn. It'll be a good little day.
I think so. And again, one of the things our Sunday school class has done is we'll rent out one of the theaters, and then we can even do a little presentation at the end. But let's talk about how to promote this for just a minute. Stephen, you know how to do this. We have the trailer, again, the least of these .movie. And then there's a place for group tickets. There's a place where people can type in their zip code. Now, as I understand, there's kind of a sneak preview January 31st, but then it rolls out February 1st. What's the importance of getting everybody to the theaters February 1st and 2nd?
Well, again, depending on people's timing in their personal lives and their ability, there's a Fathom event happening the last day of this month, January 2019. And you can just Google what Fathom is if you need to. FATHOM, Fathom Entertainment is a company that does very specialized releases of all kinds of different events and sporting events and things like that. And or you can go to the least of these .movie. Now remember, folks, it's not .com. It's .movie. Least of these .movie. Make sure if you're sharing it with your friends to point it out, because we don't want to send them to the wrong place. We make it as easy as possible for people to share it, as you were saying. But for me, right after the Fathom event, last day of the month, February 1st, the film is in a whole bunch of theaters. I'm not sure, at least 400 theaters nationwide.
Got the list there.
And if it keeps going like it is, that'll kind of in a platform distribution model, that'll grow to as many theaters as the folks respond to. So it's exciting.
So, Nick, we need to get all the people listening right now to go and tell their friends.
Yeah, so you've seen Aquaman, that's great. You've seen Into the Spideyverse, that's great. But now it's time to go see the least of these. Now, here's a real superhero story.
You want to see the man? You saw the man who swims underwater. Now come see the film about the man walking on the water.
Yeah, he surfs without a surfboard. So you got to go see. You got to go see the least of these.
Pretty good.
You've seen.
Yeah,
that was good, bro.
That's good. Stephen, I know you have to head on, but it's just great to have you in studio, and it seems like every time we turn around, we're having a chance to promote one of your films. So thank you for coming in today and spending some time with us.
I'm going to be back soon, guys. We got this film, Church People.
I know.
A little comedy we produced.
Okay.
Me and Mike Lindell from My Pillow. You know Mike. Church People is going to be fun. It's myself, my brother William, his wife China Phillips, Donald Faison from Scrubs, and Joey Fatone from the big pop group, as everybody remembers him. But he was wonderful in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So we just did this little comedy that's starring Thor Ramsey. A lot of Christian knows who he is, and we're looking forward to it. Guys, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for blessing us with today. This is going to be great, and it's going to be great for the film.
We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. And Nick Pitt's still with me. And Nick, this has been kind of an unusual day and a kind of an interesting day because we've had everybody from Hal Habecker, David Allen, Stephen Baldwin in studio, but you and I are still here for a few more minutes.
We've channeled Lev Vygotsky and scaffolding and educational psychology in 1 hour. Then we made our way to movies in the second hour. And now here we are in the latter part of the second hour. I don't even know what's going to come come from that? What are we going to talk about? I have no clue.
I think we will go back to the daily briefing. If nothing else, first of all, it is a testimony to your abilities that we can move from one topic to the other and you still hang in there. You know as well as I do, sometimes we bring in a guest and we only can stay in a very narrow area. As they say in West Texas, pick your ruts carefully because you'll be in them for a long time. And with you, we can talk about a lot of different things, but I think it is important at this point to come back to a conversation I know you've had before, and that is about the Gillette commercial, because it brings us into toxic masculinity, the hashtag #MeToo movement. I know some of our callers are going to want to talk about that, and you address that in the daily briefing.
Yeah,
Kirby,
I'll just be honest with you. I understand. I'm keenly aware of our culture right now that's trying to demasculate men. I rarely will want to come down hard on, and I'm not going to come down hard on this particular issue, but I understand the toxic nature. I understand the desire to emasculate men. I understand the APA's recent guidelines that they released. I understand the New Yorker magazine, the New York Times piece that said that when a good daddy gets promoted to mommy, I understand the desire to want to pull back on men and not let men be men. But I just don't. I think individuals that are getting outraged about this Gillette ad, it seems as though they're projecting their cultural outliers onto this ad. I really didn't see anything wrong with the ad. But literally, it's men calling out men. It's men calling out another guy for catcalling, which we know 50% of women have been sexually harassed in the workplace. 61% have been. Somebody needs to call them out because women right now shouldn't have to endure that. I know for a fact. There's over 300,000 women that have been raped in the U.S. today, like that, or through the year, one every 98 seconds. That needs to be called out, right? And so, I think that if some institutions have to do it, in a perfect world, the shaving company wouldn't
where does that come from?
Yeah, like a raising cup, the best a man can get. Like, dear goodness, like a shaving company shouldn't have to do this, but something does need to be done.
Well, again, the commercial, in case anybody has been in a cave the last few days, is called The Best That Men Can Be. And again, I think it is not controversial either, and I agree with you. Real surprise, you and I hardly ever disagree on much of anything, but I can understand why there's maybe a little hypersensitivity in light of, as you pointed out just a minute ago. So let's acknowledge the fact that sometimes the feminist movement or the hashtag #MeToo movement goes overboard, and we recognize that men being men and demonstrating masculinity sometimes is identified as toxic masculinity, when it would be better to focus, as you said, on sexual abuse, sexual harassment, catcalling, a variety of other things. And so I thought that, if nothing else, it is pretty pathetic that you have a commercial that has caused the conversation. But that's the conversation we're having right now.
And again, it's not new, though. So we understand that we're just in a world today where corporations and some of these organizations see that it's very beneficial for them within the marketplace to take these stands. Like Dick's Sporting Goods has decided to take a stand against the Second Amendment, or not necessarily take a stand against the Second Amendment. They've decided not going to sell guns, which in a free market, in a free country, that is their ability, and they benefit from it. Nike has decided to take a step out when they went for Kaepernick, and they went really hard for him. They can do that if they want, just like I'm freely allowed to not buy Nike if I want. Like, no one's forcing any individuals to buy Nike right now, and no one's forcing individuals to buy Gillette. You don't have to force me to buy Gillette. I don't have to buy Gillette because I'm not shaving, and that's a whole different issue that we don't have to talk about. But nevertheless, I understand, and I understand because this is my own tribe, I guess you could say. Like, I'm keenly aware of organizations and entities and certain companies that are trying to emasculate men. I'm keenly aware of that.
Yes.
I just don't think that this Gillette commercial is one of them. And when we're constantly crying out, my tribe has typically been the one to say, quit being triggered, quit being snowflakes. And I feel as though, it seems as though we are walking into that right now when we see this Gillette ad that is literally 90 seconds of just dads making sure their kids aren't wrestling needlessly, endlessly. Because in a civilized society, yes, men do wrestle, boys do wrestle, but at the end of the day, the parents call them out. Believe me, Michelle Pitts, Joe Pitts called me out for wrestling. Like, we have to, in a civilized society, conflict is not solved through aggression.
Well, again, we'd love to get your comments. 1-800-351-1212. First of all, if you have not seen the video, we could play it, but I think you've probably seen it. And I remember the first time I saw it, I said, oh, that's good. And then all of a sudden you hear the controversy, and I'm like you, I'm going, okay, did I not see the right video? Did I not see the right commercial? What's the deal here? Because the examples they used were either kids fighting, bullying, or one that I thought was very well done. There's a bunch of men, one woman. He said, now what she's trying to say, the
mansplaining thing.
Yeah, the mansplaining and the paternalism and stuff like that. And so I'd love to get your comments, because so often we talk about sexual harassment on this program. Just a day or two ago, we talked about sexual brokenness. Last week, we talked about unwanted sexual problems. So this is not a topic we have not addressed. We have talked about the hashtag #MeToo movement. We've had Penna Dexter write about that. And, of course, that's in our Outlook magazine. So I'd love to get your comments, because that is one of those comments about this idea of toxic masculinity. So maybe you want to say, well, that is a real issue, but maybe it wasn't dealt with effectively. Again, we'd love to get your opinion, because the program is called what?
Point of view. And so here's some numbers, because I'm always a numbers guy. And so we'll go back to one, the mansplaining piece, because that was a very that's I think many of us can have seen that very much up close.
Sure.
And so there was actually did some research on this. So there's mansplaining, but then it's coupled with this idea of mom shaming. And so the mom shaming is where you have a mom that's watching after her child, and then you have another mom or you have another individual that comes in and offers that unsolicited advice. And there's actually numbers behind this as well. So mom shaming and mansplaining serve as like two of the most prevalent forms of unsolicited advice. 60% of mothers say they've been criticized for their parenting skills. 80% of women have experienced mansplaining, which occurs when a man explains something to a woman in a condescending or patronizing manner. There was a fascinating study in 1987 that found that when offering unsolicited advice, women were more polite while men were more assertive in their speech patterns, which is really fascinating.
That is true.
Because we see, but even in the biblical narrative, we see hints of this as well. So Nathan gave very assertive advice to David, and then you also see a donkey, which gave a little bit more, not necessarily assertive advice, but he was more polite, I guess you could say, as polite as a donkey, that you can be. And so while we can't control the advice we receive, we can regulate what we do with that advice and how we give that advice as well. And so obviously, you want to be very sensitive when offering such advice, but I do think that we need to be keenly aware of the fact that, one, there's more women that are in the workplace, and so there is the sense that there's just been structures that have been built up that are very disadvantageous for women, as we're already seeing in this Me Too movement right now, where many women have felt that they've been silenced in this with some of the wrongs that have been done. We're going to be keenly aware of that. And then, too, we need to be keenly aware of just there's fewer and fewer kids. The birth rate continues to fall down. And so instead of trying to be critical of moms, we should just celebrate that we have moms that are wanting to be present, one, and then two, that are wanting to be active in their child's life. And so
let's take some phone calls and get your comments. We'll go to South Carolina, WLPG. Tim, what's your point of view?
Hi. First of all, good afternoon to you gentlemen.
Thank you.
I was calling. I absolutely agree with everything that you all have said in regards to the Gillette commercial. I personally didn't have any type of aversion to it. I thought it was well done. I understood its point, but I can also understand with the hypersensitivity of people kind of going bonkers over the commercial. But you know, the term that's being thrown around a lot is toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
And yes, there is toxic masculinity. But on the flip side, there's toxic femininity. And what I mean by that is that certainly I've trained my son to be a godly man, one who understands that God has a role for man, God has a role for women, and we are to honor women, respect them, and treat them with dignity. But, you know, women who are pushing and railing against men today are the same women who are promoting a primetime commercial for Victoria's Secret.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, there seems to be a double standard there. Like, look, you know, you're asking men to not over-sexualize women and to see women as sexual objects, but yet you support the industry that's promoting it.
Yeah. Well, let me put you on hold because we've got a break coming up. It's one of those mandatory ones, and I don't want to cut off Nick Pitts because I know he's got a few things to say.
I've got a couple of things I want to say right now.
And we will give him that opportunity and give you a chance, Tim, right after these important messages.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Ed McDaniels was a local pastor in Upshur County, West Virginia. One day he asked the local school superintendent if he could place Bibles on a table in the local public school. He didn't want to hand students anything. He just wanted to set out the material as a resource the students could take if they wanted to. The school had a policy of allowing the local Little League, Boy and Girl Scouts, 4-H Club, and other community organizations to set their materials on a table. Students passing by could take the material or simply ignore it. In a separate policy, the school prevented the distribution of religious and political materials. Local residents sued the school system, claiming that the policy preventing distribution of religious materials also denied McDaniels access to the community information table. Eventually, the Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit determined that distributing meant physically handing out materials. In fact, the court explained that if the school kept the Bibles off of the community information table, it would breach its duty of religious neutrality and, in the words of the court, evince the hostility toward religious speech that the Establishment Clause does not require and that the free exercise and free speech clauses forbid. So look around at your school. Perhaps there's a community information table waiting to be stocked with Bibles. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
More people today are saying Americans don't really need religion, but America does need religion. Religion helps the economy, families, and even national security. Learn more by reading Saving America, 10 Reasons Religious Freedom is the Key to Our Nation's Future. You can download this free booklet at firstliberty.org/Saving America. That's firstliberty.org/Saving America. Discover 10 ways religion benefits America at firstliberty.org/Saving America.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. And again, Tim started us off talking about this idea of toxic masculinity. And the first point I'll make before I get your comments, Nick, is that you have to define your terms.
Yeah.
Because, toxic masculinity could be used to explain everything from things which I think are biblical, that men are to treat women with dignity and with respect. I don't see that as toxic, but some feminists might, to all the way to all the things that are in the commercial, in the Gillette commercial. So first of all, define your terms. But then he was raising the other question about Victoria's Secret, a sexualized culture, and boy, we've been talking about that the last week or so.
Yeah, so I'm always of the mind that let's go. I never want to blame a woman for the way that she's dressing just because I can't control myself, right? Like I've got the Spirit of God inside of me. Like the same Spirit of God that caused a dead man to come to life should be able to help me to be able to make a covenant with my eyes relative to the women that are before me. So I never want to blame a woman.
Guard your heart. Scriptures talk about that too.
Oh yeah, I never want to blame a woman for the way that she's dressing. Her dress is her problem. And my eyes are my own problem. If I can't control myself, then I probably need to stay inside.
Yeah.
It goes back to what is John Adams said: if you can't control your mouth, then you need to sit at the child's table. So then the second piece of that is the toxic masculinity. That is such a that's a big word, especially from Tennessee. That's a lot of syllables for a guy like Tennessee for me to handle. And so that's a really big word. So what do you mean by toxic masculinity? And so this is where I really want to hone in, because again, I'm a numbers guy, so I like to look at the numbers. So there was a survey that was put out and said that only 56% of women prefer a man with some manners. 64% expect to split the bill on a first date. Okay, so good manners in my mind is making sure, like when I go out on a date, that I'm picking up the bill. Good manners in my mind is making sure that when I'm walking down the stairs, I'm the first one. When I'm walking up the stairs, I'm the last one. That's good manners.
Yes.
That's something. Good manners is making sure that I'm not going above and I'm treating a woman with honor. Like when you're putting sexual harassment underneath the same umbrella as opening a door for someone or splitting the door. I mean, that's
redefined terms.
Yeah, that's a really big umbrella. And I'm not at the beach. Like we're not trying to block the sun in this instance. We need to hone in this and need to have a conversation with this as well. And that's where I think it's really difficult, especially if you're a millennial, if you're a Gen Z right now, making your way in this world. There's just such ambiguity in this world right now. And it kind of goes back to some of the research that Jonathan Haidt, which we'll have in studio on Tuesday, which I'm really excited about.
The coddling of the American mind.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
And there's
the
us versus them mentality. There's the ascription of everyone being evil if they disagree with me. I think that just inhibits conversation for us to be able to further define because I want to treat others the way that I want to be treated. I don't want somebody to invade my personal space, but I would like if somebody picked up the bill for me. But I'm also from the South, and so I know that there's certain social norms and taboos that I'm one, not supposed to do, and two, I'm supposed to do. And so I think it's important for us to clarify some of those terms, increasingly so in an outrage culture in which we live in 2019.
Well, again, we certainly talked about the Gillette commercial, but I thought I'd also promote your briefing, the daily briefing, and you have something about the Democratic National Committee will not sponsor the Women's March.
How about them apples, huh?
Now, what's so interesting is the other day, Gary Bauer said there's going to be two marches, one that you won't hear about, that's the March for Life, and that's Friday, and I want to get your comments about that, and the other one, which you'll hear lots about, and that's the Women's March because of anti-Semitic concerns, and that's one of the things you've posted, and that would be something I think Point of View listeners have heard, but I would imagine a lot of people are completely unaware of what you've posted there on the Daily Briefing.
Yeah, so it's fascinating. It feels as though for individuals that are saying that we're getting better as a culture, it seems as though we're still struggling with some of the same problems. Everything from this whole idea of tolerating white supremacy to the anti-Semitic, not only the anti-Semitic remarks, but then you have some of these anti-Semitic actions specifically that are taking place on college campuses right now that are so problematic right now. So let's go back to the Women's March. And you have this Women's March, and you have certain individuals. One of the co-presidents, Mallory, I believe it's Mallory. I can't remember how to pronounce her last name. She has gone on The View, and she calls out of one side of her mouth. She says that Louis Farrakhan, who has likened Jews to termites in 2017, likened Jews to termites, is now calling him the GOAT. The greatest of all time, which is the shorthand for that, but not willing to condemn those remarks in 2019. It's unfathomable that could happen. But then it just adds on top of a phenomenal expose that was put out by Tablet Magazine. I highly recommend this. It's just talking about how there's certain individuals that are involved in the Women's March movement that are in leadership that are beginning, that are beginning to circulate some of these conspiracy theories against Jewish individuals relative to slavery. And it's ludicrous. You would not believe it if you were coming from it. It seems
1930s
like something,
Germany, you'd believe that. Maybe even 1950s America, you might believe it. But 2019 and 2019 in America, you can't believe it.
It's just unbelievable that we're having to deal with this right now. And so, if we're not willing to call balls and strikes, if we're not willing to call evil evil, then our silence fuels the evil. And so, if someone doesn't see anything wrong with white supremacy, you got to call it for what it is. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. If someone is not willing to condemn anti-Semitic remarks and likening Jews to termites, then faithful are the wounds of a friend. You're perpetuating evil by your silence. And so I think it's just, I can't believe we're saying this right now. It's increasingly important in our world today just to be able to call out your own side. It's fascinating.
And that's the problem of tribalism. The other side is the evil, not our side. And we're going to be talking about that, as you said, on Tuesday when we talk about the coddling of the American mind. So I'm really looking forward to that. Let me end on a positive, though, because there's another march, and you won't be hearing about that except on Point of View, and that is the Pro-Life March, which will take place on Friday. And, of course, then the anniversary is Tuesday on January 22nd. And if nothing else, as we've said before on our Millennial Round Table, your generation, perhaps the most pro-life generation in the history of America.
You're welcome, America.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that millennials don't do right. Okay, we're selfie taking, we're Snapchatting, we're Uber riding, we're student debt accumulating. But on the pro-life issue, we've kind of got it cornered right now, and I'm excited for this one. I think there's some great organizations that are doing some significant work, not only one to be able to understand that there's younger people that are behind this pro-life issue, but then mobilizing them in such a way that they might be able to do tangible acts to be able to create more of a conducive culture. Because again, I don't want to, it's the womb to tomb mentality. We want to create a culture whereby understanding that the number one reason why individuals are getting abortions is they're, quote, having to manage an array of responsibilities. Well, it's really hard to dream about a future with a child if you're bogged down in the present with the child. So how do you create a culture whereby individuals are coming alongside you to help be the community and to be the family that helps you manage some of those responsibilities so that your mind might be captivated about helping your child begin to ride a bicycle, about walking with your child into the kindergarten classroom. You can't dream about the future if you're bogged down in the present. This generation has been captivated by how do we be the hands and feet, whether of Jesus or whether just of kindness, being those hands and feet to help manage those responsibilities so that they can dream.
Well, we've got all sorts of things we're going to cover tomorrow, but I just thought I'd get your comments about that. And again, pro-life seems to be winning the war of ideas. There are more pregnancy centers than there are abortion clinics. When you watch that march, if you watch it on conservative media, because the mainstream media will ignore it, you'll see a lot of young people out there. And that's not what Planned Parenthood assumed. They assumed that after a generation after the legalization of abortion in 1973, your generation would be more pro-abortion than ever before, and they turned out to be more pro-life than ever before.
One of the beautiful reminders of God's invisible hand at work in us, and he's not through with us, because what he starts, he sees to completion.
Well, again, we are going to see you next Tuesday. We're going to have you in studio. We're going to be talking about some of those important issues. If you find yourself saying, boy, you went through some of this really quickly, or I want to find that daily briefing, it's thebriefing.net, but you can go simply to pointofview.net. You can find everything you need to know. Andrew and Steve, thank you for your help. See you back here tomorrow, right here on Point of View.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.